Okay, guys, we're about to start the next talk. This is Pavle from Flavorworks, and he's going to be talking to you today about starting a studio. So,
hello, hello. So you heard a bit from Mike about kind of the dangers of starting your own studio, and from Harry about the differences between the AAA world and starting a studio. And I'd like to tell you a bit about the nitty-gritty of starting a studio or a company in the UK. So this won't be very much like, believe in yourself and all that. So like this is assuming that you know what you want to do, that you really want to do it, that you understand the risks that are associated, the odds that things are going to go wrong and all that. A bit about the actual specifics of how starting a studio, or in some cases like any sort of business in the UK works. Like we're very lucky that the UK actually has like a pretty good environment for starting businesses. It's quite easy, as I'm going to go into. So I think it's a great opportunity for all of us. So just starting off, just a little bit about myself. Yeah, as you heard, my name is Pavle. I was 18 in Portugal. I'm Portuguese when I read an article about Peter Molyneux starting a company in Guildford called 22 Cans. So I sent him an email and I told him that I wouldn't be his best programmer, but I'd be the cheapest. And I was like, for 3 years, I was just really good value for money. And I stayed there, I programmed, and that's, I guess, the first takeaway, if you will, that you shouldn't sell yourself short if you can at all, because it's it's a business, and you got to try and like maximize your earning potential throughout your career. So if that's the first thing you take away from this, that'll be good. So after 3 years at 22 Cans, like I learned a lot there. I learned pretty much everything I know about making games. I was approached by a colleague, Jack Attridge, and he had this idea for this really interactive marriage between films and games. And so we decided to leave 22 Cans and start our own company. And right now we're called Flavorworks, and we're working on Erica. This is a screenshot of the trailer we released last year. You can find it online if you want to see the trailer. I can't talk too much about it because we have a publisher, and as I'll also get into in a bit, they get to control how much we say about the game and when. So for now, we can only like present the trailer for it and say that it looks lovely. It's incredibly interactive, but still fully real, with real emotions and real characters and real people. So when we decided to leave 22 Cans to start Flavorworks, we didn't know anything about like starting a business or starting a company. Neither of us had ever done it. We both actually didn't have that much experience in the games industry. But I think luckily what we fell into is that we were in Guildford, where there's a lot of studios, and we were very open to asking for help. And I think that's the main thing that I've learned through this whole process, is that whenever we had like a question, or even initially when we didn't even know what questions we had, we would just approach people that have started studios that we admired, and we would just ask them like, hey, we're trying to do this. Sometimes just cold approach them, so like send them an email without ever having met them before. We're trying to do this. Could we get lunch and just pick your brain and just tell you what we're trying to do and ask for any advice? And overwhelmingly, people were willing to do it. We would offer nothing in return. We would just say like, hey, we have an idea and we're gonna try and do it. And quite often people would pay us, buy us lunch as well, which was nice because we were like super broke. We were somewhat hungry at that point, so it was really good. And this helped really kind of build our network and get our game out there and get our idea out there. And so very early in that stage, we're asking people for help, and we incorporated our company. And this is kind of the first of these like technical details of how it works in the UK. I think that incorporating is actually like a pretty big step. I hear a lot about people that are like working on games in teams that are kind of amorphous and nobody quite knows. It's a group of like 3 or 4 people. They're all making a game, but maybe some take it more seriously than others. Maybe you don't quite know what the ownership is. And incorporating kind of removes all doubt from that equation, right? Because you know exactly, first of all, it turns this thing from what could be a hobby into a job, right? Because now you're actually employed by a business, and you might not be getting paid at that point, but you are technically employed by a business. It's your full-time job. And also it splits the ownership of this thing you're building very clearly, right? You say like, either you split it evenly or however you want to split it. Everyone gets like a percentage of it, and you get to then have no more questions about that, and you get to like move forward with this like unified vision and unified goal. In the UK, it's actually incredibly easy to incorporate a company. It costs literally £75. It's a thing you do online. You need to submit 2 documents, which are the Memorandum of Association, Article of Association. I don't quite know what these are, because the government gives you like standard copies of them, which you can use, or you can go to a lawyer and get like custom ones. Usually the standard ones are okay. And then when you incorporate, you can open up a bank account, which again is really important, because once it comes to like splitting that stuff in the beginning when the money is super tight, it's easiest to just like say, all right, we're gonna all put like X amount of money into the bank account, and then we're gonna like draw from that for any like company expenses. And that's also good, because the money that you put into the bank account count as director's loan, which means that later on when you take money out, you don't actually have to pay taxes on it, because you're not actually making income. You're just taking back the money that you've put in. So you've just loaned the company some money, and now the company is giving it back to you. And also the money that you spend from the bank account, it's much easier to get tax credits on that money. It's, for tax purposes, it's much easier if you just do it straight from the company's bank account. So that's something that I would suggest. And in the beginning, the most important thing is that you make a demo. And I'm going to spend like quite a bit of time on this point, because I think it sounds superficial and not important. But the important thing is, this isn't like make a game. Like, you're not starting a company to make a game, because in the vast majority of cases, unless you're like making Stardew Valley and you have some way of supporting yourself that's not the development of this game, you're probably not going to be able to fund this whole game by yourself. So you should aim to make a demo. You should know exactly how much of this game do you need to make in order to prove your point and get someone else to give you the money to make the full game. You need to have like a very decided and small scope. And you need to make sure that whatever you're making, that like the moment someone like picks it up, they understand what's special about this, what's good about this, what's gonna be easy to market about this. I read a good book on marketing, if you'll believe that, called Pink Cow, which is essentially about the fact that the marketing for your product, it doesn't start when you say like, all right, we're gonna like buy ads. It starts when you're deciding on what the product is. I can think of a few examples that are successful without it, but you should be making something that is inherently marketable. Something that like you can tell it to someone in a sentence and they'll know like, oh, I understand why that's special, or even better, I understand why I'd pay for that. So because we were making what's essentially an interactive film, that helped us, right? It's, first of all, it's a great idea. It's going to be an amazing game, but it's also very easy to talk about. Once you tell people, it's like, hey, you like films, right? People like films. Like, think about that, but make it like incredibly interactive, incredibly intimate, incredibly tactile, and people would get the idea immediately. If you're making something that is just a really good iteration of something, it's harder to talk about. So try and make something that you can immediately get people to understand what's incredible about it. And make sure that it's a demo, and once you're done making the demo, development is over until you find money. So once you have a demo, there is no point in then, unless you can like think, all right, we can actually make it better, but you should actually stop developing it once you're done. So like, we have a demo, and now we're gonna go try and find money, and if we don't find money, like, this business is over. The demo is the initial goal. With that demo, then you can start raising money. And I'm just gonna go through a bunch of the avenues by which you can raise money in the UK. Some of them we actually went through and got money that way. Some of them we didn't, due to various reasons. The first one is the UK Games Fund. It's been mentioned here before. I think they recently just closed their this year's round, and it goes up to middle of next year. They have 2 different programs. They have the pitch program, which is £5,000, and they have the full kind of Games Fund program, which is 10 to 25. The 10 to 25, usually they require like a lot more experience, like people that have like a much more established track record. The pitch development program is much better for people who haven't like made games before and who like want to develop that demo and then possibly the next year get the full amount. These are really good programs because they're kind of very much no strings attached. The Creative Europe program, this is kind of, some people think that because the UK is leaving the EU, this is going to stop working. The UK is going to be in this program until 2021. And you can apply for somewhere around 100,000, 150,000 euros. And the application process is like its onerous. It's hard, right? It's a very long application. And there are like companies that actually write these applications that are experts in writing them. So it's pretty tough. We applied once for another project. We didn't actually get it. Also, the important thing with Creative Europe is that if you're applying for it, your studio has to have released and sold a game before. So if it's the first game your studio is making, you can't even apply. But we spoke to them, and they're not basing who they accept on how many copies your previous game sold. So you can actually release a very small game, sell 5 copies to your mother, and then apply, which they said was okay. So we didn't try and cheat them out of anything. But these two are very good because they're both kind of very much no strings attached. Some of them need match funding depending on what the exact fund is. Kind of a more general one is investors, right? So investors, I consider people who buy equity in your actual company, not people who are going to invest in a game and then want money back, but people who want to be in the business for the long term and expect serious growth. So the thing with investors is that they make money when they make an exit, which means your company either goes public, so your company grows so much that you can now be on the stock market, or if someone buys your company. So what we found is that in general, investors, they don't want to fund a company and then the company is you and 4 friends and you have a small office and you make incredible games for the next 15 years and you live incredible lives. That's nice, but they don't actually make money if you do that. If you're a sustainable business for a long time, they don't make money. They want growth. And depending on the type of investor, they might want hyperbolic, incredible growth, right? If you're talking to actual VCs that usually invest in startups and social media apps, they will want that incredible growth, and they will actually sometimes try and push that onto you. So we found that sometimes we're talking to an investor and they're telling us that we should make it more like Snapchat, or that we should add VR to it or add AR to it. And essentially, if an investor is trying to change what you're doing, they're probably not actually interested in investing in your business. They're just having a bit of a good time, kind of brainstorming and being creative and just enjoying the whole positive atmosphere of it. And this process actually takes quite a long time because it's very pleasant and it's very safe to say yes to things, to say oh, that sounds amazing, that sounds great. But it's very hard to actually give someone money and to go through with a deal. So we found that it tends to happen that these processes get strung along without any explicit no's for a while. We eventually actually got investment from our former boss, from Peter Molyneux and from Ian Livingstone, and when it was a night and day difference when people actually were fully invested in what we were trying to do, because then the process was quick. Then it was 2 meetings, we're talking about terms, we're figuring out the deal, and it actually happened quite quick. So it's something to be careful of. But even when the process was quite quick, when it was 2 meetings in, the actual signing of the paperwork and the funds and all that took a while, and that actually took something that I was kind of initially quite uncomfortable with, but it takes quite a bit of nagging and following through and emailing someone, because these people are by definition quite busy and quite successful, so you kind of have to kind of follow through with them. Again, in the UK, there's an incredible program that's called SEIS, Small Enterprise Investment Scheme, which means that if an investor or a group of investors gives you up to 150,000, they get to take about half of that money off their taxes the next year. And it was probably in large part due to this program that a lot of small companies in the UK can get investment, because it makes it very risk-free for investors, and it almost makes it a bad idea not to invest up to your allowance each year. You need to get pre-approved for this. It's not hard. You just have to submit some papers, and then once you're pre-approved, once the people give you the money, there's some more verification that you're indeed a small business and that there's no tax avoidance going on. But it's an incredible program, and if by chance your company were to fail completely, they get even more money off their taxes. So there's this one for 150,000, and then after this one, there's the Enterprise Investment Scheme for larger amounts with a smaller amount of relief. At this point, if you are talking to investors and stuff, you probably should get a lawyer. And this kind of goes back to the other point about asking for help, because I was initially afraid that I'd walk into a lawyer's office and they would tell me spend 30 minutes with us and then send us a bill the next day for £1,000. They're not going to charge you money unless you've like signed papers that say that they can charge you money, and they will give you like quite a bit of their time for free, right? Because they understand that they need to like develop a relationship. So you can go into, ask some lawyers for a meeting, and then just go in and ask a few questions, have them like look over something, and like in that initial stage, it actually won't cost you anything. You can just like say like, hey, we still just have some questions, and then maybe in the future it'll be like a proper, paid relationship. The next avenue that we also pursued were publishers. So publishers, they're more invested in that actual game. So whereas with investors, it's more kind of about the team and the long-term vision. With publishers, it's more about the product you're making. And we found that when we were pitching to publishers, we had to like hit 3 main points. The first one was why we're doing this game. So first of all, why it's us, why our team is uniquely positioned to make this game, and why this game specifically can be successful. So trying to kind of paint this story of the development of this product and how it kind of fits into the market and why it's going to make money and all that. Then for the publishers, the demo was even more important because it not only proves out the idea, it proves that like, hey, we can actually make this. Like you need to reduce the risk for the publishers. So you need to actually show them that you can make, I've made a small piece of this. With a bit more money, I would make the whole thing. And the final thing is the budget and the schedule. And this is important, obviously, because you need to know these things. You need to know how much money you need and how much time you need. But also because publishers, they have a stable of games. So they need to know, how does this fit into our group of games? How does the release schedule of this fit into the rest of the releases? How does the size of what you're making fit into the rest of what we have? And quite often you'll speak to a publisher who, like, even if they love your game, if they have like another game that's too similar, or at the moment like they have too many things in development, you kind of have to fit into their schedule. And sometimes it's good to even before you approach a publisher, to try and like ask around people that have spoken to them recently and ask them like, hey, do you know like what are they looking for? Like what are their ranges? Like what kind of budgets are they approving? And possibly, and obviously you shouldn't try and like radically alter your vision, but possibly slightly change the pitch, change the product to try and be something that like fits more towards what that publisher is geared. Again, with publishers, you shouldn't sell yourself short. Usually, at least from our experience, people won't say no to your game because it's too expensive. And initially, I think the initial instinct is to kind of nickel and dime them and be like, if we make this super cheap, maybe they'll give us the money. But publishers can see through that, and they know that it's going to be more expensive than that. So just try and have like a very realistic assessment of how much money this is going to cost in a way that's not going to require like more money down the line, and how much time it's going to take. And I think that with publishers that really helps, because it also shows that you have like a degree of professionalism about this, and you're not just trying to get them to give you the stuff and then deal with your problems later. It takes even longer than the investment deals, because kind of by their very nature, there's assignment of IP. There's like a large variety of types of publisher deals. There's like publishers that take IP, publishers that don't take IP. Then there's like large amounts of ways that money can be distributed. Sometimes you have to recoup, so they have to make their money back before you make any money. But then like what rate do they make the money back? And then once you start making money, what amount of money do you make? So at this point, there's like pretty heavy negotiation. There's like large contracts that need to be reviewed. So this takes even longer. Like from beginning to end, it can take after someone has agreed that they're going to do it, it can take 6 months to a year to just actually do it, to get all the contracts written up. So take that into account when you're planning for this stuff. At this point, you should also get accountants. So there's and again, the UK has an incredible environment when it comes to this, because for the first 2 years, you can actually not file for taxes. You can file like on your second year. So in the beginning, you don't actually have to do a lot. You don't have to register for VAT up until like the gross revenue reaches a certain point. So like for a while, the workload with the bureaucratic stuff is actually quite low, which is why it's a great idea to incorporate early. And it's not going to like make your life miserable because you're like filing for taxes every month. So, but at some point, you will have to like get accountants to do like PAYE and stuff. It's not that expensive, and you should try and get the accountants to do as much as possible. Initially, I made mistakes where I didn't quite realize what the split of the work was. So when it came to like payroll and stuff, I was trying to like pay people manually and stuff. Just try and get them to do as much as possible, removes as much from your hands. None of us are very good at this stuff for a good reason, because we didn't study it in university. So just try and get them to do as much as possible. And then the final step, and the one that I found the scariest, was hiring and in general kind of managing people. So I come from a programming background, but once it came time to actually having to grow our team, Flavorworks is like 8 people now, we had to actually find more people. And when it's people who you know, it's a bit easier because you know who this person is, you know the quality of their work. But when it's people who you don't know, you have to have an interview process. And before we started Flavorworks, I'd actually only ever been to an interview. I'd only ever done an interview at 22 Cans, so I didn't have a lot of experience. And this actually led to initially quite a very inexperienced and bad interview process because of my lack of experience. When I decided to go out and like ask for help regarding this and speak to programmers that were more experienced, that had either hired people before or go through more interview processes and like talk to them about like what was good about the process, what was bad, and actually develop a set formal process for how we interview people, it became a lot better. And we became a lot better at treating applicants better, because we were better at responding quickly and at knowing what we wanted, and we got better at finding the people that we needed. Also, when it came to like managing people, I think initially I was quite naive about it, where I thought, oh, you know, me and these people, we're all friends, and we're all reasonable people, and we're all smart, and we're all good at our jobs, so there's no need to be like, you know, to manage people. People will just like do their job. And it is true. Like if it's a small team, everyone's good, everyone knows what they're doing, there aren't going to be too many issues. But you do need to make an actual concerted effort to manage people. So like speak to people about like what could be done better, what could be, what are their views of the work that's being done. Make sure to communicate how you feel about the work that they're doing. So make like a concerted effort to communicate and not just assume that, oh, you know, we're friends, it's going to be okay. Like you need to go above and beyond when it comes to communicating to people that you're working with, to make sure that over time miscommunications don't build up into an actual issue later on. So that's something that I've been you know, slowly improving at, just talking to people and getting better at that. That was, I guess, a very run-through list of the things that I've learned. Again, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are now if we hadn't just asked people who we didn't even know for help. So if you're thinking about doing anything like this and you do have questions, or even if you just want to like, you know, pick my brain about something, that's my email address, that's my Twitter handle, and I'll also be around for a bit if you guys have questions, or if you have questions right now. Yes?
You mentioned, so you've got external investment, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned some other routes to kind of accessing funds. Did you have any success with these, like or any of those other ones?
No, we haven't. And this is a bit of a peculiarity that I didn't go through. There's also, there's a European limit to how much assistance your company can receive from the government. It's called the de minimis state aid limit. And they try to kind of do it to reduce the amount of influence governments can have on small businesses. And that limit is about £150,000. So if you actually take your full SEIS funding amount, you can't get some of these other UK funds. So I think the last I've heard is that the UK Games Fund actually clashes with SEIS. And if you get your full SEIS amount, you can't get the UK Games Fund. That might change once the UK leaves the EU, because I guess they won't be bound by the limits, but I have no idea. So you kind of have to speak to your lawyer and your accountant about that. So yeah, so we got investment, but we actually haven't received any other government support other than that. Any other questions? Yes?
Sorry, and when it comes to presenting a concept to either an investor or a publisher, if you were to summarize, like, in a few points, like what basic concepts of the game to like present to them, what would they be?
I think the important thing you're trying to present is like why your game is special, right? Why, And I think the demo should do most of the talking for that. People should pick it up and play it. And we had just a demo on an iPad that we could take around, and we would, if we're talking to someone on an elevator, you can just like grab the iPad, push that button so the game starts, put it in their hands, and be like, hey, look at this. And like the demo should very quickly explain to people why the concept is special and why people are going to be talking about it and why it'll be like easy to write an article about. And like the product itself, I think, should do most of the talking. And then you do have to explain like, hey, here's the reason why we can do it. Here's the reason why we can do it better than anyone else could, and try and like sell that. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Sorry, yes?
I don't know how related this is, but how difficult is it as an international student to stay in UK, especially if you're going to work for someone who's just starting a business, kind of like your situation?
Yeah. So, because I was Portuguese, I didn't actually need any paperwork. Like and that was just very lucky of me. I could just like stay here and work here with no problems. I think that's also like an important part of incorporating, is that then you are, I think, and I haven't checked this, you check with the lawyer, if you work for a company, if you don't make money from them, or if you're a director of a company and you don't make money from it, you're employed for that time. So your employment history has no gaps, which I think tends to be an issue for people that come from abroad. So I don't actually have a lot of experience with that, simply because I was lucky enough to be Portuguese. But that is something that I think you should check before. Yeah. Yes?
I know this is more about like starting a business starting a company in the UK, but how would you say would you approach starting a company outside the UK? Would you still follow the same principles, like go get like funding, go get a lawyer, and everything else?
I think the principles are very much the same, but when it comes to the actual like nitty-gritty of starting a company, it's so much harder in Portugal that some of my Portuguese colleagues actually start companies in the UK and then continue living in Portugal and continue developing games in Portugal, but their company is based in the UK, because the kind of the tax burden and just the paperwork burden is so much higher in Portugal. The other thing is that, at least my own experience again is with Portugal, is that the ecosystem there is not as good, right? Here, and one thing that I forgot to go through is that when we were looking for investment, UK's events really helped. We're down in London. Games London has a lot of events where they'll just like get a space, and there'll be 50 people there, and of those 50 people, 15, 20, 25 are either publishers or investors, and you can like speak to 20 people that night. So that ecosystem was incredibly helpful. So I'm not sure how I would have done it in Portugal. Like, I think in Portugal, it's more based on competitions. PlayStation runs the competition every year in Portugal, and then the top game gets some funding directly from Sony. There, it's more based on that, or trying to get money from the government. So I think the approach would be slightly different, and possibly it would actually be harder. So that is also a thing to take into account. It's how fertile is the land, where in the place where you are. Which sometimes is very unfair, because obviously people don't choose where they are or where they're from. Any? Yes?
When you first started, did you guys have an office straight away? Like, did you have a place that you worked at together?
No, that's a great point. No, for the first year or so, I was just working from my bedroom, and my co-founder was living with his parents, because we were just trying to like reduce expenditures. But that was actually like a pretty hard time, because I was just working by myself at that point. I'm the only programmer on the team at that point, and I just spent about a year by myself in my room. So that's just kind of that was an odd hermit-like year. But it is important, like in the beginning, to try and keep your costs as low as possible, because even if you're talking to investors and they're going to give you money, they want to know like how far are you going to like stretch this, right? What's your runway? Which is a pretty scary term, because essentially what they mean is like, when are you going to like run out of runway, and then I guess careen into what's after the runway. So yeah, trying to keep like your costs as low as possible initially was really important for us. Any more questions? Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah. Oh, I think it's just you. Yeah. Go ahead again.
So how did you guys
We don't actually use any like third-party engines, but also I think that if you do, most of these engines have free licenses that'll just like throw up a splash screen at the beginning, and you can just use that all the way up until you're ready to buy the license and actually fully pursue it. The other thing was that I don't think I could have like done this straight out of school. I spent quite a few years knowing that I wanted to do something like this, and just pretty aggressively saving money in order to do it, so that when I did decide to do it, I could support myself for what I thought would be a year. It ended up like being short because we had to like put a bit of money actually into it. But I spent quite a bit of time saving the money, and say like, you know, I knew that I was gonna need a laptop, so like I had to like, you know, save the money and then like buy a laptop so that I have a computer that I could like work on, that wasn't like my work machine, because my work machine doesn't stay at work. So it was, you know, we started this company in 2015 now, but it was something that had been on my mind for a few years, and that I'd been kind of preparing for, which is I guess the boring work, which is, yeah, just, you know, preparing your resources in order to do it. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead again. Sorry.
Like, because I hear a lot of stories of like, you know, a lot of games companies that are quite small, they get more funding than they ever expected, and they usually like tend to crack under the pressure. So like, did you have to handle any of that pressure? Like when you realize that the real money's involved, it's not something that I can walk away from now.
Yeah, it does change expectations, and it does. You essentially, you make a promise, both like a kind of moral promise and a, you know, legal one to your investors, that you're gonna like take this as far as you can, and that you're gonna, you promise them growth, right? You promise that this business is gonna grow, which in a lot of ways was really good, because like that gave us a goal, it gave us something to like work towards, and it gave us accountability, right? Because then you have to like update them and tell them where you are and what you're doing. But yeah, it is pressure, and also and we were very lucky with this, the people who we're working with are great, but if the investors or the publishers and your goals aren't completely aligned, that can actually lead to quite a bit of issues. If their goal is that your studio needs to be like 50 people big by the end of the year, I could see how that could become an issue, because then you're hiring way too fast, and you're possibly, you know, losing a lot of like team culture, and it's very hard to hire that fast and hire well. So making sure that your goals and the goals of the investor are completely aligned is incredibly important. Anyone else? One more? No? Sorry, go ahead.
Some advice I've seen from people like businesses, they say get an accountant almost immediately, like very early on. Is that something you agree with or not?
Well, the hard part becomes once you start trying to like draw a payroll. PAYE seemed to be particularly complicated. Before PAYE, it wasn't that bad. Like we would just essentially have a bank account which we would put money into before like we had like investment and anything like that. We would just put money into the bank accounts and then, you know, take it back out when it needed for stuff. And because you don't have to actually file taxes or anything like that for a while, it's usually fine. And again, completely not an accountant, so please don't take any of this as like actual legal advice, but it seems to be that as long as things add up at the end of the year, you're fine. So there was a period where we'd been putting money in, then we took some money out, and then we probably took a bit more money out than we put in.
I assume keeping track when you went as well, what you're taking out, what you're putting in, why.
Yeah, but you know, you do have a bank statement that keeps track of that as well. So it kind of, you know, and initially it was all a bit amateurish, but as long as like things add up at the end of the year, it seems to be fine. So, you know, you just have to like pay taxes on the money that got like taken out, and then, so yeah, by the time you have to like file your end of year statement and all that, you definitely need accountants. You know, none of us could do it. I mean, probably could, but it'd be dangerous.
Not as well as accountants.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, there's a reason why they make money doing it. Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, like when you first started, obviously you were quite small. Did you guys have to deal with like people just not being able to handle it, like walking away from the project?
Well, and it was just the two of us actually, and I think because it was just the two of us, and we both had like kind of pretty well-aligned goals. Like we knew that we wanted to do this, and we knew that like it was gonna like take a while and it was gonna be somewhat painful. So we didn't. I don't think either of us had to deal with much of that. We both kind of knew that we're gonna take this through to its conclusion. So I think if it was like a bigger team and if it was like less defined what the effort levels were going to be, it would have been actually like harder. But because it was just like the two of us, we knew exactly what we were trying to do. We knew what the goals were, both like short term and long term. So it was actually, that never became an issue. Yes?
So what's the actual formal plan for this?
The formal plan for?
To start a business, or was it just like both had the same ideas and just randomly?
That's also a good point, because we didn't start with like a business plan. We started with this concept for a thing that we thought would be really good. We had this idea for something that would be good. And then from there, we kind of said, all right, how much money would we need for that? How could we get that money? And that's when we started like asking around for people. So we started with the end goal in mind, but not the path. And then we had to figure out the path as we were going along, which to some extent we're still doing. So it was more just the idea for the product and why we thought it would be good. And then from there, we determined all the steps that we need to take to get there. Anyone else? Yes?
So at which point did you both start looking for funding, and what kind of funding? Was it just strictly investors or grants, or did you look to start a Kickstarter or anything like that?
I don't think we ever quite considered the crowdfunding path, because I'm not sure it'd be like very appropriate for our product. But we did start looking for funding pretty early on, like around the time when we were still making the demo. We were already like talking to people and thinking of like who we could show it to, and we were just like showing it to as many people as we could, just kind of make sure that the word was out, that we were making a thing, that we were like looking to talk to people. Yeah, whether it was publishing, whether it was government finance, whether it was investment, and it is something that you have to start like very early on. Which again is why the focus on making a demo is very important, because once you have that, then you're essentially, you have a product to sell. You're coming to people and you're saying like, hey, this is the thing that I'm trying to sell. Like, do you buy into the idea? Yes?
Did you do any form of prototyping before you broke off and to be your own company?
We did start working on this before we moved on from 22 Cans, kind of, in our free times. And it was, I guess, partly like prototyping and partly trying to build a demo. But we did pretty soon, once we knew that this is what we were going to do, just kind of put all of our eggs into one basket. There wasn't a lot of, should we do A, B, or C? It was like, the whole goal is to make this one thing, so let's just try and make it as well as possible and then try and sell that idea. Yes?
When you made the demo, did you guys keep working on the demo until you found an investor, or did you just make it and then hyper-focus on?
Well, I think somewhat because of the nature of the product, because it is filmed, we had to actually film this. So we had to get some money together, get a bunch of people together in an Airbnb somewhere in London, somewhat legally, and actually film what we were going to make the demo from. So once we had that footage done, then we had to assemble it into this really interactive thing that we wanted to make. And then from there, I was still polishing it, I'd say. But we had these 10 minutes of content that we're going around showing. And then, I was bug fixing, I was polishing, especially. But the priority was to show the thing that we'd already made to new people. But obviously, you're not going to have 12 hours a day, every day, each week of showing the game to people. So I was both making it better and trying to make the framework that we later on used to make the full game. But we did have a demo, and the priority was to show that demo. Anything else? Yes?
How many different indie companies did you talk to before while setting yours up?
We spoke to like 6, 7, 8 people, and some of which I wouldn't have thought would have even accepted to speak to us. But overwhelmingly, people did help us out with people who have no possible benefit from it, that were just helping us out because people tend to be okay with helping, it seems. You know, it was just something that surprised me. Yes, yes, actually, yes. Some of them would then, you know, refer us to publishers and stuff, and even, you know, that was, I guess, the actual investment. We went back to the place where we used to work, and we're like, hey, we have this thing. Are you interested? So that was also came from kind of the personal relationships we'd build up, and the publishing deal that we ended up getting was also from people that we'd worked with in the past. That then, you know, you show it to one person and they're like, oh, you know who'd be interested? It'd be like this guy at the company, and we show it to him, and, you know, soon enough you've gone kind of up the chain, and you're speaking to the people who are actually able to make decisions on this stuff. Yes.
Did you have an idea of what kind of investor you wanted, or were you just taking anyone that was willing?
Initially, we were taking like meetings with anyone who would speak to us, and I think it took us a while to understand that there were like different like categories of people, the different like ranges that people wanted to like invest in, and then just like different types of investors. There are people who focus specifically on games and who probably have like a bigger understanding of like the games market, and then there are people who only invest in free-to-play games. And initially, we found that if someone was only investing in free-to-play games, they would probably try and steer us in that direction. And then you have to like, you know, think about whether you want to like change what you're doing to kind of match what the investment market is kind of looking for at that time, or if you want to try and find someone who just wants to go all in into the direction you're already in. So initially, we were just talking to pretty much everyone. And because sometimes just by talking to people, you do learn a lot about the process and what people are looking for, and you get a lot of feedback on your idea and your business. All right, one more? All right, sorry. I think, yeah, one more and then, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask how you handle the.
Well, so now because we have a publisher, they're going to be handling most of the marketing and the kind of outreach. So we haven't actually done much in terms of like showing off the game. Some of it because it's still like pretty early in development, and some of it because we can't. Like all the public-facing stuff is now dealt with by the publisher. All right, thank you very much, guys. Thanks for coming.